now joined by Baylor head football coach Dave Aranda. Your time and journey at Baylor kind of coincides. You were on our very first show, Coach, on April the 6th of 2020, very soon after you took over, and we've had a great journey. What about the journey in life? And you're real good about explaining things like that and building and things that you've done in the past like that.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you guys for having me, for this. But I just think, I think it's inside out. I think the ability to have that view of yourself, I just think on the outward side of it, man, just how hard is it to have like an honest conversation with somebody, right? With just the maybe the different beliefs or the tainted views or the skewed perspectives or the unquestioned beliefs that you're bringing into it, right? And so I just think the ability to really kind of search and kind of work it from an inside out perspective is the big part of the journey, because I think, especially as a coach, right? If the character of a coach is not right, then it's going to be hard to get the team culture right. I don't think the team can become what the coach is not,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think it's a lot of work.
Is it easier to chase to be a champion, or is it more difficult to stay on top?
That's a good question. I think they're very different. I think when you're chasing, I think there's the issue there is belief, and I think when you're staying on top, the issue there is accountability, and so I think there's I don't think it's mutually exclusive. It's just one or the other. But I think the major theme when you're chasing is belief. It's just that, hey, that this can work. That this is, there's somebody else's view of it. Here's someone else having success. Here's what I saw on TV. Here's what I'm seeing on social media. But this is what we're doing, and I'm going to believe that it works. And I think all of that's very hard. I think especially if you're way different. And then I think to stay on, I think, there's an element of I use it in a coaching perspective, but, guys coming back they were on a successful team. Last year they were grad assistants, and now they're promoted to full-time coaches. Or last year they were full-time coaches, but now they're calling plays. Now they've graduated to coordinators. And I just think like that accountability and that responsibility, and to let go of the old and to embrace the new, even though the old was good, but to embrace the new. And, this ain't 21, this is 22. And this is what let's not worry about what looks good. Let's worry about what's real and get into it. I think that takes a lot of work, too.
If you've had success over time, that prevents some from being entitled to say, well, they've been winning, so that's just, maybe they don't know of how hard it was, what you guys did in 20, in the offseason of 2021, and the incoming players, they don't understand that at times?
Yes, I agree with that. I think, when you have a team of 115, 120 guys, I think, and then just, the staff changes, or, let's say there's guys that get raises, and it's like that can change. The thing about, like, what's great about all of this is just it's a platform to show the world who you are, and there's so much growth that can take place, in it. And you talk about just like the season, we play on Saturday. Every Sunday you got yourself a brand new team, because, someone had success, someone didn't, someone risked it and was rewarded, someone risked it and was burnt, right? Someone's got confidence, someone doesn't. You got a brand new team on that Sunday. And I just think the off season, for sure, that's the case, brand new team. And so I think to be real with it, with what is real, and to, not sugarcoat it or to not fly over it, but to kind of sit with it is hard. But I think that's where the growth is, you know.
You told me one time, I asked you this question about the defensive talent in the SEC compared to what you've seen so far in the Big 12, and you talked about just the alpha dog raw talent that they had, especially on defense, and that in the Big 12 is much more scheme oriented. You are accumulating what I call some dogs, and it seems like you're adding pieces like almost, constantly. Are you getting to a point where you're starting to accumulate that type of defensive talent?
I think the additions that we've made have been strong in terms of that, that side of it. I just think, there's just immediately as you're asking the question, my mind goes to the LA Lakers, and I just think of like there's so much that goes into. I think people are always hired for job skills, and they're generally fired for behavioral skills, and so you have to have both, right? And you have to develop both, and like what it means to be a teammate, and how do we want players to treat players, and how do we want, players to treat coaches? How do we want coaches to treat players? And just all of that. And so I think within the talent acquisition, it's more of who the person is, right? What is what are their beliefs on what this is all about and why we're here, and what's their why, and kind of get it ingrained so that they can be them, but then align with us, move with us, and so all of that is kind of really what's happening right now, and so it's great to. It's exciting when you can kind of see the potential of a thing, but then, I think every, interaction, every, negative thing that comes up or any positive thing that comes up, like how that's handled, I think is way important, because you're showing who you are in those things. And so it's a time of talent acquisition for sure, but it's also a time of building a culture, and I think those two things are tied at the hip.
You are very young at wide receiver. You've mentioned that, but you have some guys there that look the part, no question. Is that a position where younger players can be more impactful because of pure skill than perhaps other places, perhaps like the defensive line or the offensive line or a quarterback, that wide receivers can be more impactful even if they're younger?
I think there is some truth to that. I think there has to. I think the scheme and what is being asked of them, right, has to enable that. And so I think of some of the strengths that we have on offense is really the alignment, the simplification, the cohesiveness, the strong identity in the run game. And I think, really getting, and I think that shows, you can do simple better. And I think the throw game wise, I think that is really our charge with being as young as we are, right? Because it can go the other way if it's this depth, if it's too high, it's that depth, if it's one high, right? If it's one high with outside leverage, it's this. If it's one high with inside leverage, it's that. If we get into those weeds, then it's the other thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the ability to enable our best players to play their best is a big part of it.
You have some quarterbacks in that room, and obviously with skins on the wall, what Gary did, and then what Blake was able to do, and also the young up-and-coming with what Kyron Drones and Rodgers bring to the table. Sometimes a quarterback competition can hurt a team because it can split a team, but you have a couple of guys that get it. You have more than a couple. How do you keep that, and how difficult is that to make sure that you have players like Gary and Blake who understand whatever is best for them is best for the team?
No, I appreciate that. I think it's I mean, so far so good with that. I think it's, from this point on is when all that I think will really be tested.
Mm-hmm.
I think is probably the first thing to say. But then I think, give a lot of credit to Sean Bell and to all of them, to Gary and Blake and KD and all of it. I just think really like defining what it is. This is what the competition is. And this is what we're looking for. And like being really clear on that definition is strong. And then, then I think the other thing is like modeling, like, hey, this is how we compete, right? This is how we become good teammates. This is how we give, as a coach, real clear and concise communication, and everyone knows kind of where we're at. I think those things kind of help because I think the trust level needs to be that when you're not in the view of the guy, you think the guy's got your best interests at heart, and so I think that's the key. And so I think the ability to define it clear, to have really good communication, and to model kind of what it looks like is a big piece.
Mike Gundy remains, without question, the senior head coach in the Big 12 with Patterson now gone at TCU. There's a lot of coaches who have been in a year or two or three. This is year 3 for you. Do you see the conference in any way in the Big 12 changing based on the constant or the newness of the coaching staffs?
I think there's going to be an element of more spread entering in. I think just a year ago we were talking about how it looked like it was trending out, but I think Tech is going to be a factor there with a spread offense. I think West Virginia sure still is, and then I think TCU is going to be a factor there, and so I think some of that is changing. Oklahoma for the time being is another one where it's going to be a spread look. And so I think there's some of that, back in the league where it was kind of transitioning out. And so I think it's good. The amount of tight ends that are in the league and the amount of, wide zone and play action pass shots and everything that are going to happen on Saturdays, I think is way strong compared to most conferences. And I think the spread element just kind of rounds it off and gives it a really unique complexion, man, because one week to the next it's going to be about as opposite as you can be.
You seem to be pretty much I guess ahead of the curve with what you do with your defensive schemes that you learned along the way, and now what you've done at Baylor, LSU, Wisconsin, Utah State, etc. How do you keep from getting ahead of yourself? How do you keep the checks and balances to make sure you don't, I've got this thing covered, and that you continue to humble yourself?
Yeah, I think the need to understand and the need to learn, I think it's just kind of is always there. And I just think like time moves fast, man. There's things in 2019 that we were doing that you really can't do now. It's caught up to those things, and so then you have to kind of move on. And it's a cool, that is a really cool thing about it is that you can't cheat the game, and the game will pass you by for sure. And so, so much of my time is spent with people on people things, and generally those are messy. And so when you do come out of that, it is cool to get into football and kind of see where things are going and who's doing it and kind of where the trends are, and talk to people that are, at the front of those trends. It used to be when I called, no one would answer, but now I get some answers, so I can call people and they can pick up.
What did Mack Rhodes' extension mean to Dave Aranda?
No, excited for him, excited for us. He's been a big reason why this is the place for me and my family, for us, and I think the ability to talk to him about anything, and then for him to, to come with just the view that he does, and where sport is, and the fit that it has with the person and the journey that we all go through. I think, he gets it completely, and just way happy for him and for us.
I know that you guys have a long way to go, the spring, the game, scrimmage, and then, of course, the off-season and the season. How proud are you when you look back at where you were, what the program was when you arrived, that Matt Rule had left some of what he had in the cupboard, but what you guys have done in a couple of years, and not just the staff, but also the players themselves that have bought in?
No, I appreciate the question. And I look at just the vulnerability that has to take place. I think some of the things we talk about are just not the normal things. And it, I imagine it starts with me. I just, if I don't talk like this, then I would be acting on what, these are what coaches are supposed to say. Mm-hmm. I have to imagine there was probably some of that when I first started, and so to let that go and to just be completely me, I think is probably a vulnerable thing. And then I think for the players to kind of let go of hey, this is what a coach is supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed to look like to be a football team. This is what you're supposed to talk about, right, when you win and all that, to kind of let that go, because they're kind of, you got to walk into a black hole, really, a void, because it's all new to them. And then I think coaches too, because it's, I think on one side of it, when you're sitting back in the summer to have a talk about compassion and, nuance and truth and everything is one thing, but then to be talking about it, prior to a Wednesday practice of a whatever week, game week, that's a whole other thing. And I think for them to come to that point is way cool too. So I think a lot of people have allowed themselves to be real, be vulnerable, and allowed us to get better.
Dave, thanks a lot. Again, April 6, 2020, we began soon after you began, and to have you on that first show and to have you on the second anniversary show means a lot. Good luck the rest of the spring, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Dave Aranda, Sic'Em 365 Radio, 365 Sports.
Go ahead, Craig.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to mention there was Dave Aranda, Sic'Em 365 Radio, and there was one question that he could not answer that I wanted to point out. Josh White.
Yes.
He could not talk about Josh White because the paperwork is not clear. So when Smokey asked, y'all have any questions? I had a question about the changing of the Big 12 with all the hires that have been made, and he had a really, unique answer and said, yeah, there's going to be more spread concepts. So it was cool to hear that. But the other question I had was obviously to hear him talk about Josh White and the addition of him, but we're going to have to wait. And hopefully we'll get a heads up when that's cleared and know when we can ask, because I'm very curious to hear his thoughts on Josh White.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for bringing that up. I had to ask through those at Baylor, when can he discuss a player, because there's not really a signing day. He will enroll, and then I guess he's probably cleared to be. I did ask him, knowing that in a way, about the additional or the accumulation of various talent from Siaka Ika, and now, of course, with Josh White and what it's bringing to the table for Baylor and the football program. Hope you enjoyed that with Dave Aranda. We appreciate that. He is such a nice guy, man. And his first answer to my question, I'm still trying to go back and listen to it, because it sometimes I have to dig deep, because it's just incredible to listen to. It really is.
As somebody who often recaps, various interviews he does, you kind of have to listen twice through. You really do. Like when you're standing there, like when I was standing there on Saturday and listening to him talk about stuff, there was maybe if he goes a little longer on something, just kind of like, okay. But then I go back and listen to it like an hour later, and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't hear him mention that and that and that, and all that makes sense. And so, you kind of have to give him a run through twice, but always fun to listen to.
He's like the dude in Kung Fu.
Yeah, very wise.
Yeah.
Very
wise. There's different ways we've tried to explain him, and he's definitely unique. But I've really gotten to the point, enjoyed the time when we get a chance to visit with him, whether it's a media session, one-on-one, or elsewhere. All right. We're going to have